This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
Welcome to the Possibility Club. It's easy to say that we're all climate activists now. Even the most traditional fossil fuel-powered businesses will have their compostable coffee cups, carpool incentives, and commitment to using bags for life. But are we even close to getting real? Survey after survey shows that there is serious intention backed up by a serious kicking of the can down the road. The climate emergency needs both small and big change, incremental and urgent. It is not either or. Sustainable businesses need to look at every part of the input and output that impacts their organisation. In international terms, Scope 1 is about looking at what carbon emissions our activity creates. Scope 2 is about what emissions our buildings and infrastructure contribute. And Scope 3 is about our clients and suppliers. How are we choosing them and holding them to account? Most businesses are still just about looking at Scope 1, and only just about. It takes bravery and investment. It takes time when you're focused on survival. It takes energy when distractions feel like a luxury. But it also takes mindset. You do not have a future as a business, as a charity, as a public service, without taking this seriously. And whether that is because you'll be failing to comply with inevitable laws that come in later down the line, or because simply no one will want to work with you if you don't. I don't care, it's the same outcome. But looking at the people and the businesses that are nailing it can also be daunting. Some look quite smug, holier than thou. Can you be both virtue signalling and genuinely virtuous at the same time? Probably. But smug is better than willfully causing harm, no? The debate about impact is sometimes also a debate about extremes. How far should organisations go in their strategic positioning? Or should they even be strategising at all? Are the teams of the future simply the ones running at speed, unafraid to break things on the way? Perhaps responsible change demands that business act first and analyse later. My guest this week has lived at the edges, the fringes, the extremes of positive environmental impact. For a year he lived off-grid in the Sussex countryside. In an isolated shepherd's hut, he created his own power and found his own food, documenting the impact he was creating and what it had on him. And these days, he may have moved back into suburbia, but the mission is greater: to harness technology as a power for collective sustainability, to support businesses to take carbon neutrality seriously, and to create off-grid spaces in which busy people can understand what life can be when we switch off and lean in. The tech entrepreneur prodigy who had sold his first business aged 21, a poet, a radical, a social media influencer, and an unusual thinker. On this week's edition of the Possibility Club, I'm chatting to Dave Erasmus. Hello, I'm Richard Freeman, and I'm here. As always, you're here. Fantastic. Welcome. And as usual, I've got a very special guest who's going to join me for half an hour or so on that little journey. And I've got Dave Erasmus. Entrepreneur, speaker, thinker, doer, a man that particularly interests me because has an off-grid life and is very, very nature-focused from what I've read and seen, but is also a technologist and somebody who believes in the power of technology, and they don't often sort of coalesce. So I'm quite keen to explore that a little bit and everything else as well. But first of all, Dave, welcome. How are you?
Richard, thanks for having me. I'm very well and really appreciating these whiffs of spring that we're getting the last few days. Definitely breeds a bit of hope and excitement for the year ahead. So looking forward to exploring and wiggling our way through over the next half an hour or so.
The whiff of spring. Now that's a delightful phrase, I think. So technology, nature, off-grid, on-grid. you clearly, through your work that I've read and your talks and things, have an open mind about sort of where the future of society is going and how we should be thinking about things, and putting a kind of mirror up to the stressed out, wrung out, corporate consumerist world that perhaps we all spend too much time in. Talk me a little bit about how you've got to where you are at the moment and what's led to your kind of core philosophies.
Well, I grew up in a really good community, strong values, inclusivity, looking out for people, and sort of quite faith-filled. So believing anything's kind of possible in vein of in the name of your podcast. And then I was an internet kid. I'm 37 now. I remember showing my dad AOL Instant Messenger for the first time, being blown away. I started making some money on eBay, buying and selling things. And then I found Google AdWords at 19, built that company, managing people's ads on Google, had all my friends working for me. I had 20 of us, and then I sold the company. Obviously had no idea that was possible. I had no idea how good I had it. Paid off the mortgage I had with my mate on a house, built a log cabin in the garden, fire pit, hot tub, and had, I don't know, 100 or 200 grand left in the bank. For a kid who grew up in Wales and then 6 of us in a 3-bedroom terraced ex-council house, there wasn't really any benefit in me buying any fast cars or any material goods. All of my friends would have thought I was an idiot. So it made me ask broader questions. Well, what work is worth doing? You know, if I don't need to work in the same way, what actually is worth doing? And that's where these questions started to get a bit broader. And then I ended up seeing this mobile, social, local technology shift all cased in the iPhone coming along, and thought, well, if this is transforming how we operate society, what are the best behavior sets that we could encourage? And so I built a donation platform called Givey that was all about trying to encourage the daily habit of giving and be a place to hold your digital identity for giving. Because if you look at your 20 apps on the front of your smartphone, it's a nice thought to say, well, what do they say about me? Who am I? What do I engage with every day? And there was nothing that was on the front of my iPhone that pointed to what I give or what I contribute or what I set off as a ripple effect in society. So we set about doing that. I went through venture capital and all of that stuff. And when the VCs finally took the company off me, which is another story, I kind of ran out of map. I ran out of direction, ran out of anything to do with the world. And the theology I'd grown up in as well, around beliefs around what God is, had kind of worn thin on me as well. So I really internally and externally had nowhere to turn and no one to turn to. And so I ended up finding my way into a woodland. I mean, I got permission from the guy that owned it and got 25 acres, wheeled a shepherd's hut in there and spent a year intending to be off-grid. But to your point about technology and nature, what I found there was a gentle momentum, a life beyond purpose, a way of being that was outside of goal setting and goal achievement. And crucially for me, as somebody who likes chatting and public speaking and TEDx talks and all that kind of stuff, kind of a life beyond narrative, beyond sort of putting the story out to the world that you then try and backfill to make real. It was my way of getting resources out of society to do the things I wanted to do. And so I found this whole other space of human being rather than human doing, which I had always been subject to. And I'm kind of looking at purpose from the other side, from the non-doing position. But what else grew out of that rhythm of watching the flowers and the seasons dissolve and reemerge was making YouTube videos, which is something I had done a little bit of before. A couple of my friends had become popular on YouTube, but it really found itself for me in the woods. And I made a weekly video. So I was living in this strange reality where I was living this hyper-local life, predominantly between my 25 acres, the pub and the co-op on the corner, about a 10-minute drive away. And yet also I had this community globally, people sending me socks they had knitted from Australia to the pub and giving me advice through my YouTube videos of that I needed a carbon monoxide detector because otherwise I might choke myself out in the night. So I found this really strange social dynamic, and I realized that this wasn't off-grid living, but there were elements of it. There was a lot more space created for the off, but I was still benefiting in many ways from being on. And so what I realized was that this lifestyle that I had sort of fallen into didn't fit in either of the worlds, but actually was beginning to cultivate this interesting, balanced momentum that relied on switching between those worlds in various different combinations. Fast forward 5-6 years, I'm engaged to be married. I've got a new apartment in Surbiton on the edge of London. My friend who I used to own that house with and I have now bought 10 acres of horse fields that we're looking to regenerate. We've moved my hut up to there, and that will be our base. And so that combinatory 1 + 1 = 3, hopefully, lifestyle of on and off is morphing and changing for me as my fiance is more of an on-grid city dweller, and she's moving my way and I'm moving her way. So it's a constantly evolving, ephemeral balancing act, as we all know life is, but certainly a different way of thinking about city and country, mind and body, on and off grid, on and off line, on and off piste, even with the ideas I was working with, that fraying edge between the on and off.
Dave, it sounds like the Holy Grail. It does feel that everything, that you've talked about through most people's experiences is much more polarized. The mindful, conscious, local, present, ethical life feels like that always has to be a counter or in opposition to technology, money, and comfort, and all those other things. And so many conversations I have, it's about one or the other, and which one you choose says everything about you. But life doesn't work like that, and I can't work like that. I want the best of both. I want to have my cake and eat it, because it feels like that's surely that's what we're moving towards in terms of human progression. We need to scale back from these extremes, and the word you used was balance. But so many people fail at this. What's your secret?
Well, firstly, I haven't got it nailed and dialed. I was sweating bullets over tax year and, HMRC end of January, like most other people are. As I said, it's a constantly evolving, morphing thing. But what I will say is there is definitely emergent value that comes out of occupying both worlds. Today is Thursday. On Tuesday, I was on the farm all day, did like a 12-hour day, shoveling shit, literally, to create the next beds for growing. Saw the green shoots coming from our pink garlic from the first time, which is our first thing we put in the ground. And there were connections being made there between friends. And I know one little story that I heard was that one friend, Josh, is going to go and do some shadowing with my other friend, Sam, who's a crane operator for TV productions. And they both took a day off where they'd make a few hundred quid by doing what they do, to come to the farm, to be together, to create some space, and a connection's being made that hopefully then will benefit their on-grid lives, if you like. It's not that they're just entirely separate. And I would say as well, what a joy it is to be on Zoom with you right now, having this conversation. I don't know you and you don't know me. It's not likely we're going to put a whole day aside to spend together before we've made that connection. So what a joy to click on the Calendly link, set up this podcast conversation, and enjoy meeting you, sharing stories and connecting. I love the internet. I love Zoom.
Absolutely.
But also what a joy it would be to have the next one around the fire, so we're deeply interwoven between the worlds, but I think to get the most out of life, it's not just about work-life balance. It's about this on and off balance, because there's something that occurs when you're in the analog that is deep, not broad. The internet does broad very well. It annihilates space and time, but it doesn't help you go very deep. So there's something there that complements the breadth of the internet. And I guess that is my answer to the New York grind story that says, in your Casey Neistats, your Gary Vaynerchuks, your David Goggins, 24/7, go, go, go,
Hustlers.
crush it, crush it. Yeah. I don't see it as sustainable. I don't see any genius ideas coming out of that constant grind, that echo chamber. Sure, you might get individually wealthy, but I don't see the brave, creative, lateral connection solutions that we need to steer the ship right over the next 10 years coming from that culture. So I'm really excited to try and have this conversation as far and wide as possible.
There's something interesting about hustle culture and how that drives people. And I see some people trying to use that as a force for good and motivation, but it's just exhausting just looking at it, to be honest. But you told, you said that you'd made some money early, young. Actually at a young age, you'd almost done more than most people would aspire to through their entire lives in terms of a kind of entrepreneurial, using technology in an interesting way, creating a business, selling a business, all that sort of stuff. But is there a counter to that? Could there ever have been an alternative reality where you explored that to its logical conclusion, where you went further and further and just got, richer and richer and into the new tech as it evolved? Is there anything in your personality that could ever have done that? Or do you think you always would have eventually stepped back and tried to find this alternative way of being?
I had all the options. This is what I chose to do. As it happens, I've probably let myself go a little bit too far on neglecting financial capital. I've probably optimized for too long for social and intellectual capital, i.e. having time to learn and be with friends and, build out that side of my life. And that is a constant balancing act. But, whether you get your money yearly or whether you get it in lump sums, and then don't have to think about it for a couple of years, the research all shows that earning more than 70 grand a year, there is no correlation between happiness, well-being, and money above that. We all need a certain amount, not just for the basics, but for some luxuries and some agency and choice as well.
Yeah.
But above and beyond that is no discernible correlation. So I'm not against having more money than that, but for me, it seems like a job that needs doing. So it's not space. If you give me £1 million in cash, my fiance will probably disagree, but we'll put it, no, let's say 10 million, because I think I now do have a plan. Look, I'm 37, going to retire hopefully when I'm 65, 70. Whether I make 70 grand a year in the household or whether I make 2.5, 3 million quid in one go, I need to make roughly that amount of money over 30 years. So I don't know how I'm going to get it or if I'm going to get it, but it does need to be made in order to have the family home and the kind of holidays and stuff that we want to have as a family. So I do have a requirement for money again in my life, but I didn't for quite a long time, and I didn't have a vision for it. I wasn't sure I was ever going to be married or have a family, so there was no reason. But it's about keeping it in check. And ultimately, if you go above and beyond that sort of average of 70K and you choose to keep giving all your time to trying to store up money, the question is, what's the opportunity cost to that? And when we're talking about possibilities, possibilities come from open awareness, from seeing the little glimmers on the very edge of your peripheral vision, things that you can hear in the background. And that antenna is not up if you're driving towards a goal, you're engineering towards, this optimization process. That's not where you find these new emergent possibilities. So for me, putting your foot down and then taking your foot off, being on and then being off, and learning how to go back and forward is where we get ultimately most efficiency, although efficiency as a word is probably a bit reductive for what I'm talking about.
This podcast is brought to you by Always Possible. But who are we?
Always Possible works with ambitious businesses, charities, and public services that are thinking about what's next.
From architects to aerospace companies, puppet theatres to primary schools, business networks to big data analysts.
If you're wanting to be brave with some big decisions, or to be clearer about what to prioritise, then an award-winning workshop from the Always Possible team is a brilliant starting point.
We care about just one thing: building ideas that work.
For creative, intuitive and practical expertise, consider Always Possible as your strategic partner. Find out more about how we could power up your mission. Visit alwayspossible.co.uk.
alwayspossible.co.uk.
You know, a question I ask a lot of people and a lot of the work that I look at is, how do you measure how well you're doing against the metrics by which one defines success? And I use success in a very subjective way there, not an objective way, But in the work that you're doing, which is so iterative and developmental by the sounds of it, and sort of consciously so, and I think that's what's quite exciting about it. How do you measure the other aspects of success? Do you have any other kind of measurement tool, yardstick, metric that you go, every in a month, in a year, in 6 months, I'm going to know that what I'm doing is working because X, Y, Z will have happened? Do you ever think about it like that?
Definitely is. It's a great question. I think there's two layers. One is me as a human being. What is evidence of a life well lived? And the other is on a project level. How do I know my projects are succeeding? And I'll just quickly, I think you're asking more about the second one, but I'll maybe just give a nod to the first. For me, life is about high notes, moments of high notes. That's how our memories work. When we reimagine old experiences, it's the ones that leave an emotional imprint on our neural map that stick with us, that sort of those moments cultivated into a path lead to sort of our sense of identities of who we are and create those memories and stories. So my main currency for life is really, how do I put myself in a position to let these high moments have a chance to bubble up? Whether that's moments of creativity or of deep love and care, whether that's with friends and family or with co-creators in work, whether that's on the internet doing a Zoom call or whether that's sitting around the fire in the farm. For me, those are the notable parts where I think I'm leaving, creating meaning, generating meaning and usefulness. And I wrote a piece last year with my friend about how to sort of design a life to allow for as many high note moments to occur in our lives. So there's, and obviously going on to a project level, well, there's two things there. How do I work on projects that allow me to be as creative as possible? Because I think there's something that I really value when I'm able to execute creativity in a way that connects. And then how do I do that in such a way that it leaves me with enough space to be able to be attentive and listening to those that I love and those that don't have love, who might need some love. And really, so that's about work not taking over, because if my two values are sort of love and creativity and I'm just grinding all the time, there's not that much room for love, so that would hurt me. And if I'm just grinding, I might be operating on old creativity but not having that chance to be continually living in that experience, because it's the experience of creativity, like this conversation now. It brings me alive, it makes me feel good. This will be one of the things I'll enjoy when I lie in bed tonight and think, what did I do today? I'll be like, oh, well, I really did go for it in that conversation with Richard. So to take it down one step further then into projects and things that I'm creating, I think obviously if you can pay the bills, if it one way or another is taking in resources and the people that provided those resources are happy with the project they're a part of. They could be customers, investors, grant funders, whatever that may be. But if it's taking in resources and those that are doing the creativity and those that are paying for the creativity are all happy or predominantly happy, that makes me feel good. And if that creativity, by my view, is actually mapping itself to something that matters in the world. That tends to be, for me, an area of work that helps us to survive or thrive, that's currently under-resourced. Because if it wasn't under-resourced, there's probably a better person for the job than me and my motley crew. But if it's not well-resourced and it is important, and we're able to put ourselves in that gap, and those that are involved in that creative flow aren't upset about it, to say the least, then that's awesome for my sort of work contribution. I'm loving life. And if I've still got time in the day and energy to be thoughtful and creative about how to do Valentine's Day with my fiance, how to call my auntie in Wales to make sure she's all right, how to hang out and have a breakfast with my brother, my pals down on the coast, then that works for me, you know?
Because you've given yourself the space and the challenge, you're kind of creating a bit of a blueprint or a bit of a playbook on how to do this for yourself. And I'm sure there's huge amounts of very transferable learning to others as well. And I know that you're a coach and you work with people and organizations and so on. But how can this be a philosophy or something that others can pick up, that can be disseminated and others can lean into without real fear of the unknown?
One thing I'd like to point out before I answer the question is that, like, just to bring it into the room, I was quite chuffed with my first little monologue in this conversation where I talked about the on and the off, because I've been doing a lot of work in the last 2 weeks with my speaking agent, with a coach, with my therapist, trying to figure out how to put myself back in the box, how to package myself back up to the world, to sort of get those speaking gigs again, to get these podcasts and other things, because I've let it all hang out for a long time in the woods. I wasn't being driven by the market to sort of keep carving the edges off myself and sharpening myself. And so I am in that process myself. And today I was testing it out a little bit, and I'm quite chuffed with how I was able to explain myself. I don't know. I'll find out afterwards whether other people had the same experience. But all I know is that I'm in that process. So just to be clear, like that's actually been really hard for me over the last, since January, when I realized I want to do more of this stuff. And I'd actually forgotten a bit about the on and the off as a sort of starting point for a conversation. I've done lectures at philosophy conferences on it. I've made videos about it, but I kind of let it go a little bit, and actually realized that actually through a conversation with the speaking agent who's, I listed 10 things that I'm up to, and she was like, that's the thing that resonates for me. And I was like, oh my goodness, how have I let this go? Because I've put so much, I really believe in it, and it's so authentic to my journey. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is, before we talk about how people can actually engage with that in their lives, whatever their driving ideas are, whatever people are working with that they care about, like it's not, well, at least for somebody like me, it's not just there right on the tip of my tongue. I probably had a day's worth of difficult conversations with smart people that have cost me money, or, I certainly haven't made money whilst I've been having those conversations, to invest in myself and my self-narrative, to find that and get that feedback in that iterative process. And this is a part of that journey in a way. But then to actually engage with what I'm talking about that creating a little bit of space, it is hard to do on your own. It is difficult to do on your own. You do ideally need friends or relationships that help lead you into that place, because brands and your boss are marketing to you all the time. Technology and algorithms are talking to you all the time, screaming at you to do the thing that they want you to do. And they're pretty damn good at it by this point. So if you've got nobody whispering in your ear, asking you to come out, to come off, to go away, you've got to be really self-determining to be able to build that rhythm for yourself when no one's asking you to do it. So I would say sharing even this podcast with a friend, seeing if they could both listen to it. If you both agree that there's something in it for you, maybe helping each other to say, could we go down and see about joining the local allotment? Could we find a bench in the park near our houses, or maybe halfway between our houses, where we meet at and just sit there for 20 minutes once a week, and you sort of journey in and have that space and then see what comes up for you. Could you look for somebody, look for brave ideas in your world, people that are talking to you about their ideas that seem a bit out there and under-resourced, and could you stand with them in it and see what comes from that? It's those kinds of little behaviors that I would say are what that off space is all about. And I would say just test it and see, because what I'm hoping that you'll find is you'll find new connections, moments of lateral thinking, as in new creativity, satisfaction, mental health and well-being, and better relationships with people that you probably care about and don't see enough of, unless you make this kind of off space your intention. Or you do see them, but don't really see them in the way that you want to see them. Don't connect with them in the way that you want to, because the moment kind of passes you by. And I would love to hear back from anybody that listens to this and tests it and sees whether they think it works or not.
Well, I really appreciate your transparency, your candor and vulnerability a little bit there, in declaring that thought process. But I think your coach is right in terms of the on-off, that, that's why I led with that as the kind of opening question, because the thing that I was most curious about and perhaps hadn't seen elsewhere, as somebody, I think I'm pretty articulate about other people, certainly about other people's ideas. And usually that's why I'm a host, a facilitator, a chair, because I'm very good at bringing out other people's bits of magic. But when it comes to being really clear about what I think or what I found, or those little connections I've made, I fall apart, because as you say, you need people to bounce that off of. You need to invest in other people, sending that sonar back. Interpret this as you will. What do you want to be famous for? When people are talking about you in 100 years' time, what's the thing you want them to say about Dave Erasmus?
My friend Steve Cole has this great line, which is make a name for somebody else. And I haven't done much of that in this call. But I guess if you look at that, it's really saying that your sense of, if you were famous for making a name for other people, if that was essentially how I lived my life, I guess what that would say about me is that I see myself as deeply interconnected with other people, and I've listened to them, and I care about what's going on around me as my own, not just because I'm generous, but because I'm actually part of it, and they're part of me and I'm part of them. And famous is a weird word, isn't it? But I mean, ultimately, I want to be me. I want to be original. In economics, they've got this idea of Homo economicus, the rational man. And if you talk about being for or against something, I think this is the biggest lie of the modern world, basically, that this is what it means to be human. I believe that humans are the creatrix amorum, the creative lovers, that ultimately in our essence, that's what we are. And we put the rational man to work in order to build scaffolding to support that creative, loving human being. So that New York grind, it's good skill to learn that, but to put it to work at the right time for the essence of who we really are and what matters most in our highest moments. So if I spend a lot of my time out of that creative and loving place, and by doing that deeply into weave myself with others and support them in their dreams, and you get to know their stuff through me, then I think that would be good. That would be a life well lived.
Amen to that. Deeply noble in its ambition.
I don't know. I honestly don't think it's that noble. I just think that would be the best for me. That would genuinely make me happiest.
I don't mean it in that sense, but I mean it in that sort of everything should be defined by its connection to everything else.
Well, and my mycelium networks of relationship are still recovering from the lockdown. I've invested so much, as I said, in social and intellectual capital in the last 5 years, and it got eroded. My social bank account, my relationships got spent hard through lockdown. And I still don't feel recovered. And if in many ways, I think the off-grid part of life is needed more than ever at the moment in order to recover our relationships, workplace and otherwise, to a place of creative and balance, really, with productivity, so that we can make our organization sustainable.
100%. No, I totally concur with that. And I've on a personal level, I've called 2023 my year of adventure, or and with my family of absolutely getting ourselves into spaces, back into fun, awkward, messy moments with people, going just countering whatever isolation we were forced to have. But on a professional level, as a consultant working with businesses as well, I sense that same energy, and there's a lot of businesses that are worried about, all of the disruptive forces that are leading to uncertainty, and that's fine. But there's two ways out of that, and one is to double down on the sort of protectionist mantra and to kind of smash everything around you and just try and win, whatever winning means, or it's actually to find the humanity in what you're doing and a lot more of it. And I'm finding that really exciting. I'm finding those organizations that are coming to terms with that and sometimes radically rethinking what they do. My hunch is that those businesses are going to be the ones that really shape the rest of the century. I'm an optimist at heart, and I think those are going to be the organizations and the people that take us through the next few decades.
Well, I hope so. May I make one more comment on what you've shared there about adventure? When I talk about the creatrix amorum, the amor, doing it for the amor means doing it for the love, and that's at the heart of amateurism, is doing it for the love. We've got to a place where we've got quite a pejorative sense of the amateur. We think, maybe you don't, but I think a common view is that the professional is the proper one and the amateur is the sort of hacker wannabe sort of thing. But I actually held them the other way around. Somebody who does something for the love is really operating out of a higher place. And there are three things that I think come out of the amour that we all agree are super valuable in our lives. One of them is pure adventure. Another is pure art. And the other is sacrificial love even where it doesn't make sense. And none of those things come out of a rational place where you set about to achieve a strategic goal and then you go and do it. They come in high notes, in high moments, flashes of inspiration. You just choose to take a left turn with your family in the car because you just think, let's just go see the seaside, even though we're already late to get home, and then you end up in this open new space. So I think for me, adventure, art and love, where truly they emerge, let's say, from that intuitive place or that open space, is really what life's all about. And so I'm excited that you're on that you're making your year about that. And
absolutely.
I'm convinced that if an employer can connect with their staff in the amour, if they can get them to bring that human essence into the workplace and show them that it's valued and that it's an important part of what they're making in that company, then they will have people who are incredibly productive and extremely fulfilled for very long periods of time.
Sadly, we run out of time, but what a lovely conversation. Thank you very much, Dave Erasmus. Anything else that you want to point people towards, or further reading or information or anything like that? Anything that you're working on long term?
Probably just two things. One is my speaking agency. If people want me to come and participate in their worlds, there's be a link to that. And we reorientated our business today, which was about carbon accounting, and now it's going to be about listening to the ocean. I completed an experiment with Google at the end of last year at COP27, and that gave me sufficient feedback to think we should make all of our nature work about this now. So it's as of today, we changed it at Company's House, and it's called Acoustics Limited. Acoustics with a Q.com. And that's where we're going to be building out our work of listening to the ocean, kind of ironically trying to bring the ocean on grid so that we can listen to it, so that we can trust it, so that we can invest in it and protect it. You can find me on social media as well, just by typing my name in.
Fantastic. The huge privilege I have, I mean, I don't have 25 acres and a shepherd's hut and lots of woodland, but I do have the sea 30 seconds from my front door, which is genuinely one of the greatest possible things I can have in my life. So I will be checking out your new site with interest. Thank you very much for being on the Possibility Club.
Thanks so much for having me, Richard.
Thank you for listening to the Possibility Club Practical Bravery. If you enjoyed this episode, do like, share, review, tell everybody about it. Look in the show notes for all the details of today's guest, stuff we talked about, stuff that's of interest, new things to read, new things to listen to. And if you are running a business or a charity and you are trying to accelerate or improve the impact that you have in the world, if you want to be famous for what you do and what you change rather than just what you sell, then talk to us. alwayspossible.co.uk. We want to hear from you, we want to talk to you, we want to amplify and elevate your ideas, and who knows, we might be able to help you feel more confident and clear about what's next. alwayspossible.co.uk. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new special guest and a new insight on practical bravery in action.
The Possibility Club is an Always Possible podcast. The interviewer was Richard Freeman for Always Possible, and the producer and editor was me, Chris Thorpe Tracy, for Lo-Fi Arts. Have a good week.
alwayspossible.co.uk